But for the person out there that's got zero presence, zero branding, or maybe even a little bit, what are some things they could start going and doing right now? Like, let's say, because we talk a lot about real estate on here. Let's say there's a broker out there with a brokerage that needs some kind of branding, or an agent that wants to brand themselves, or a real estate investment company that wants to generate leads on deals, stuff like that. Are there kind of some actionable things that really anybody could start doing if they all just stick to it, have the discipline, and go take action?
So the number one thing would be value proposition. I mean, if you can't answer that question yourself, it's going to be really hard for other people to answer it for you. Why should someone want to do business with me over everyone else?
Yeah.
Right. And if you can't answer that, then you have a real issue there. Right.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be some grandiose thing or anything, but it needs to be something that you can lean into and that you can use to brand yourself so that you can differentiate yourself. Because if every single if there's 10 real estate agents on the market and they all have, whatever, mullets, so to speak. Yeah. It's like, it's going to be really hard, and they all talk the same, and they all treat everybody the same. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be really hard to say that, I'm going to pull more than this person's going to pull, or vice versa. So
at that point, it's just kind of a race, right? It's like, who can get to the client first?
Right.
Because we're all the same. So who can get to them first?
Then it goes to your processes and your business processes, and what are your business processes doing for you? So from a branding perspective, you have to attract, right? You have to attract people towards you. But then the big question, and what people don't answer, is like, what do you do whenever you do have them, their attention? Right. So makes sense. Those two are the most important things, right? Number one, how do I differentiate from everyone else? Value and number two, what are the processes within my business that also differentiate me from everyone else, but more from a functionality standpoint?
And help you really deliver on that value proposition.
Exactly, yeah.
Because like, you can go out there and tell people that you're the biggest, baddest, strongest, whatever, but then if you don't follow through on that, you're going to end up doing the opposite of what you wanted to do. Right. You set out to make a good name for yourself, and you ended up getting in front of a lot of people, and that's great, but then you couldn't deliver, and now you've got a big problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So, and again, just asking yourself those questions is how that starts. I think most people don't ask themselves the right questions, right? They just, like you said, they get into the hustle of every day doing the same thing, and then all of a sudden, right, your culture gets made for you instead of you making your own culture, right? And that can be very dangerous,
right?
Especially if you have a larger group and a larger team, because we say culture winds up being the worst thing you allow, right? So if somebody brings alcohol with them and they wear jeans on Fridays and you don't say anything about it, well, the next Friday they're probably bringing 2 beers, right? And they're still going to have jeans on. I mean, that's an example of just how things can get out of control if you don't put places and processes in there to protect yourself, and then your company as a whole. Right. But not only from the functionality standpoints, also the branding standpoints, because all of those people represent you out in public when they're working.
Right. Yeah.
So sitting down with them and actually talking about like why this is important, why the branding aspect is important, right? You talk about it all the time, right? Is it important for someone to see the big logo on the side of your truck and then go into the work site and see that everything is dangerous and everything looks like it just fell off It's not a good thing for you. Right. And then my uncle has a saying, a satisfied person will tell one person. A dissatisfied person will tell at least everybody. 10, right? At least. Yeah. And so you have to, and again, it's hard to not be anal.
Now it's even more, because now they'll
on social media, right? You blast. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I know it seems like you're being anal about it and that you're thinking too far into it, but those are the kind of things, unfortunately, nowadays that can ruin a business.
It's important.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're also having to argue with these people online about how you're not that way, when visually it shows you that you are that way. Right. So your words now don't mean anything. And then all of a sudden your validity, everything starts going down the drain just because of one interaction that you had on social media. Right.
Well, and honestly, just selfishly, like for me, putting systems and processes in place to try and make sure that vendors we have on job sites and people like project managers that I have here going out to houses and stuff like that act in a certain way is not only to make sure that people have a good experience, but also to make my life easier. Like it eliminates a bunch of headaches. And if somebody steps out of line, anytime you've got vendors coming in and out of all kinds of projects and they're stepping on each other and, you always have some overlap. The plumbers are there while painters are there and whatever. I'm trying to eliminate like the painter calling me because the plumber made a mess or vice versa, whatever.
Right.
Like you have to be monitoring that ecosystem so that it works better for everybody.
Yeah.
The happier the painter is with how the plumber operates and vice versa, the happier I am. Everybody moves quicker and easier and the house is better. It's just better for everybody. And like you said, what we always say is you're either actively training people or you're passively doing it. And it's kind of just the same way of saying what you already said. It's like you're either telling people exactly how you want things done or they're coming up with it on their own.
Right.
Because
same could be said for yourself as well, right? So like if you don't set out a process and a precedent to say this is how I'm going to do things, then what happens when you answer a phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Now you've enabled that person to know that you're going to answer the phone at 2 a.m. in the morning. And then they tell other people. Then all of a sudden you're having to answer 5 to 10 phone calls at 2 a.m. in the morning. And then you're going to bed stressed and you can't sleep anymore, right? So it's like what we used to think as being selfish or like unkind or like, when we were little really are just, it's laying out a process to where you can live your most fulfilling and productive life in a way, right? But to the external world, I can see how that could be viewed as a individual selfishness. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's a relatively new thing that people can just get a hold of you. Right.
Yeah. I tell that story all the time, right? About like in 2000, right? If I would call my mom and she wouldn't answer the phone, I'd be like, oh, well, she's in the backyard or something. She's fine, right? Now, if I don't call her, I'm like panicking, right? I'm like, where is she? Like, what's wrong? Why is she not picking up the phone? Yeah. And so we have this saying where like with the evolution of technology comes the necessity of constant communication. Because now that I can communicate with you at all times, I feel like I should be able to communicate with you at all times. And the same thing is said for a business, right? So like if a business wants to communicate with you, if you've set out that precedent and you can reach out to me at any time and you don't, then again, that's that business that's not fulfilling an obligation to an audience in their eyes, right? So perceived perception, right? It's the way the whole world works, unfortunately. So yeah,
it doesn't have much to do with marketing, but it is, I think, good advice for entrepreneurs in general is like set those boundaries, make them clear, and stick by them.
I would say it's very to do with marketing, actually. I mean, because again, all your marketing is and your advertising is an amplification of your process, right? So like if you were to be able to do what you do and just tell someone, right, what it is that you're solving and what problem you're solving, how you're going to solve it. If you could do that with just one person, all we're doing is just amplifying that to everyone else, right? So you're creating a function that should serve the people, right, that are coming in. So whether you look at it from a functionality business perspective or you look at it from a marketing perspective, really all we're doing is input, output as many people and as optimal as possible, right? And then that's where you get into all the other tools. Like, okay, well then what is this audience like, right? What platforms is this audience on, or, how are they going about getting this information? And that's how we break that information down.
That's that testing and iteration process. Cause you just,
how much education do we need, right? And how long does it take to get from point A to point B? Well, we need to have content in between to make sure we're driving them in the right direction, all those things.
Right. Yeah. Like my real estate buying company is not like a tech startup. Like there's not a lot of, it's like Arkansas Real Estate Buyers is like, just from the name, you probably know what like it's about. You don't have to walk a client through much education process. We can and say, the value proposition, why we're better, why we're faster, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's not an education like there would be on like, a new tech startup or some new app or something like that.
Essentially, there's two different types of people. There's people that take information and they take it for what it's worth and they run with it, right? Regardless of ever like diving deep into it and researching whether that might be factual or
That's
not.
Probably me.
Right? So like we look at mediums and we look at different pieces of content the same way, right? So like there's going to be a lot of people that get held up in ads, right? That are 15-second ads that are like shorts or like all this stuff that is very surface level information, right? Because that's how we attract people and that's why they work, right? And then you have more long form content like these podcasts, for instance, or even longer form content like 3-hour podcasts.
Yeah.
And think about the different details and the different pieces of information that you can get into each one of these, right?
Right.
So you can't really educate on a 15-second hype video.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So what happens is you get kind of like half of these people that are there and they don't really know why they're there. And then you get the other half that are like at the very bottom and they've literally heard everything you've said on, on social media. So it's funny how you get those two. And that's what all these different mediums like podcasts have done for us, right? Aaron and I were just talking about on the way over here. It's a way unlike any other time where you can really get into somebody's personality, right? Like an hour of a podcast, you start to break down as a character, right?
Right.
So like eventually you have to be genuine and it kind of starts to show through in a way, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are very many mediums that are like that. Even if you're trying to put on a show, like speaking in front of people in an auditorium or regardless of what it is, I feel like podcasts are the only way that there is a barrier that is getting taken down in some way or another. And it may be an interval where if after it crosses this amount of time or after we've gone here with a conversation or wherever it is, but you start to kind of get a more realistic version of them. And I think that's really interesting, right? I mean, I think it's really hard, again, knowing what I know about social media to validate and to trust.
Right.
And so
because you've been on the backside of that production and you've seen like, I mean, they can even make me look decent on film and I'm terrible. That's why we like podcasts, that's why we like, because it's really, if you think about it, one of the only chances that you really have to be able to see through somebody. Thanks for watching. If you liked that video as much as we liked making it, be sure to check out another one. You've got one here. You got another one over here. If you want to listen to the podcast audio only, go check out the Spotify link in the description. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It helps us out a ton. And please hit the bell if you want notifications anytime we drop a new video. Hope to see you on the next one.